Alrighty, so today I'm going to be doing the April MLS Emotion Index, and I technically should have done it last week because last week was the first week of a new month, and usually that's when I do the Emotion Index of the previous month, but because I was relatively busy, that's why this video is pushed back a week late. But that being said, let us take a look at how every fan base feel about their team. Are they feeling that everything is going according to plan? Still on the right track. Things could be better, but could be worse, which is the mad category, or the not so good category, which is it's not going well in this early start. And then since we are now more than a quarter into the season, I'm actually going to be opening up the free fall slash panic category because, we're now into the part of the season where you just simply cannot say that, well, it's still early in this season. I mean, yes, it hasn't been great whatsoever, and that we're not doing well at all in the league, but it's still early in the season. Though I will say that, at least for some MLS team that is in CCL, they may still have that excuse, the fact that, they've been in CONCACAF Champions League for a long time. They're still trying to get their form back on track, but it's getting to a point where we're already more than a quarter to the season, and we're already starting to see some kind of surprises in the standings, and maybe a way to define which team is actually going to be for real this season and potentially make the playoffs, and who potentially is going to continue to struggle and will find himself missing the playoffs this season. But without further ado, let us actually begin. And as always, I am going to start alphabetical order, and we start with Atlanta United. So for Atlanta, after the last game, they're a little bit higher in the emotion index. I mean, if I would have done this last week, I would have put them right around here. I mean, I think there would have definitely been some free fall and panic. In fact, I would say that, I'm not going to put them this high. I'm going to just put them still right here in the fourth one. But like I said, they would definitely been in free fall slash panic mode, Atlanta United fans, because this team looked like the 2020 Atlanta team, where it's a team that cannot score goals because they don't have Joseph Martinez in the starting 11, and he's not carrying the team in terms of the goal low, and that there's also nobody else that can score goals for this team. And also the defense, for the most part, is good, but it's not good enough with the way that they still kind of concede a couple of goals or even a goal in a game, and that their offense aren't able to come back. And although in the last game, like I said, with the emergence of Ronaldo Cisneros, who Atlanta fans are hoping that he is going to be finally the answer to potentially take the load off of Joseph Martinez, or in case if Martinez does get injured, which he currently is going to score the goals and be that guy. But we'll see whether or not if that is continued, because I know he's been in some good form with Atlanta and really has got off to a dream start in his career for Atlanta United. It's still very small sample size. We'll see whether if he can continue this good run, because if that's the case, then Atlanta should be fine. But if it's not the case, unless if they don't get Joseph Martinez 100% healthy, this team could be in serious trouble and could be looking like the team that missed the playoffs and had that disastrous 11-plate finish in 2020. But now moving to Austin FC. So for Austin, I mean, I still feel like even with that loss, I think Austin fans should be very happy with their team. I mean, I know, yes, there's going to be those naysayers that's going to point out that loss and say, yep, this is a clear example that when Austin does play against a real team, they struggle. And, I know so far when you look at the start of the season for Austin, they have played a lot of easy opponent. In fact, I'll probably make a video tomorrow talk about Austin FC and how, whether or not they can finally get that statement win, and whether if this beginning of the season was actually just fluke because of the fact that they were playing against easy team, or eventually maybe they'll get some statement win, because like I said, they have a chance to prove people wrong again, because they do have some big games coming up and some tough opponents in the horizon. But as for now, Austin fans should be happy of the position that they are. I mean, you can't be upset the fact that you're in second place, even if you do play against easy opponent. And as the old saying goes, you can only play against who's in front of you. And right now, Austin, they get to play against easy team, and they can't control that because the schedule basically tells them that they get an easy start. And we've seen so many times when teams have an easy stretch, they drop points because they overlook team. That's not the case for this Austin team. It's been a great start to the season, and that for the games, they've been able to get all 3 points against teams that they expected to beat. But now moving on to Charlotte FC, and for Charlotte, I would say that Charlotte is having a good season. I mean, I know the road woes is something that they need to figure out, but that's kind of the case for a lot of expansion teams. Like, the road is definitely the road games. There's a reason why I've said many times that it is always tough to trying to get result on a road, and we have definitely seen more teams that have performed well on the road, but still not at a rate where you can just simply say that, well, finally road teams started to really play well and getting all 3 points consistently. And Charlotte's still looking for their first road win, even though they also have got a road point in that historic no draw against the Rapids. I mean, it's historic in a way where they finally got a point on the road, but as of now, they're also kind of copy the correct formula of how you can maybe sneak into the playoffs, which is win your home games and get result on the road. And right now for Charlotte, winning 3 of their first 4 home games to start the season, and then of course getting a draw on the road, and that they're definitely in that conversation of potentially get in the playoffs. Now, whether or not if that's going to be the case, I'm not so sure. I think this team, you can see that this team maybe is still a signing or two away, especially on the attack, to get into an elite level. But if they can make those signings as what we hope that this team was going to do in the summer transfer window, because we know that this team was very short-handed coming into the league. But if they can find those players, or if they can do what Austin did, which is find a Sebastian Giroussi type of player in the middle of the season, this team can definitely be in the conversation, or maybe even sneak it to the playoffs and make history of becoming only the 8th expansion team to make it to the playoffs in their first season. But now moving to the Chicago Fires, and for the Fire, I mean, how the Fire a month ago they were like up here, and Fire fans are happy the fact that, well, I know there were some that was kind of annoying the fact that they drew 0-0 every single week, but at least they were unbeaten and that they were doing well. But these last couple of weeks it has not gone well, and it's kind of maybe a reminder there that the Fire, after they kind of blow up the team last season, this team feels like it's in a transitional period, especially with them getting a new head coach in Israel Henriksen. And that I also would like to say that most of the signings that they have in the offseason, it has not worked out whatsoever. I mean, guys like Kasper Schmeichel, he's only have scored 2 goals in the season. Xherdan Shaqiri hasn't been able to stay healthy, which has been kind of the case for some part of his career, where he could be injury prone at time. But overall the signings have just not worked out for the Chicago Fire whatsoever. And now I think in these last couple of games, the one thing that kind of kept the Fire afloat was because they were playing such a good defense. But really, I think that defensive strength was pretty much all gone, and really kind of started when they lost 3-0 against Minnesota, because ever since that game their defense has been absolutely terrible. And that Slonina, he tried his best to make some decent save, but it's also so the fact that there's some games where he just completely hung out to dry because his defense is just not doing the duty that they're asked to do. So for the Fire, it's definitely kind of free fall. I mean, not really in the panic part just yet, although if you ask some Fire fans, they would definitely feel like they're panicking with the way that this team should not be dead last, even if they got a makeover. And that it just feels like nothing is working for this team. No matter how much they try to build a new core, it is just not working for this team whatsoever. But now moving to FC Cincinnati. So from a team that has been dead last for a very long time to now a team that I think this is probably these last couple of games has been by far the best period that FC Cincinnati has had in their MLS franchise history. And it's not even close. I mean, this stretch that they had in these last couple of games, with the way that I think the last 9 games they went with a record of 5-1-3. Like, that is a playoff team in terms of the last 9 games. And 9-game stretch is a very long time. Like, that's more than a quarter into the season. And I've said it before, I think Pat Nolan has done a great job with this Cincinnati team. And that, even though there are a couple of times where they had shown the old Cincinnati of self, of them giving up late leads and find ways to lose game, this team they'll play well and fight hard every single game. And it just feels like it's a matter of time when Resort finally shown. And boy, has Resort shown for for this team. And even then, I would say that, as great of a job that Pat Nolan has done, I feel like the job that he's doing is right up there in terms of Coach of the Year kind of candidate, because I know the Coach of the Year is probably going to be won by the team that wins Supporters Shield, and that if LAFC does win it, I think Giordano will get the nod. But I think Pat Nolan would also get some heavy consideration too, because imagine if he can guide this team to the playoffs after this team is considered to be the doormat of MLS in their first 3 years. That is nothing short of a miracle. And you got to also remember, they didn't make a lot of signing this offseason. Like this, it's not like the Cincinnati team did the same thing as what we saw with Chicago, just kind of blowing up the team and make some crazy adjustment. This team is still kind of almost similar. I mean, they did sign a couple of draft picks guys, but that's pretty much it. I mean, this team almost looked very similar to last season, but they're performing so much better because, for once, they have a competent head coach in Pat Nolan, and also a competent GM in Chris Albright, clearly using his success that he learned from the Union to really guide this team now to not only be a respectable MLS team, but now could be on verge of potentially making the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. But now moving to the Colorado Rapids, and for the Rapids, yeah, I mean, it has not going well in this early start for this Rapids team. And it's kind of interesting because, the last time I did the emotion index, I talked about Robin Fraser team being pretty high up, and that it seems like they're back to being that team that is going to challenge at the top of the Western Conference. That has not worked out for them. And really, I think this kind of all started with them losing to FC Dallas in a game where I didn't think they played badly in that one, but they just couldn't finish. And that's been the story for this Rapids team this season. They just have not been able to have those clinical finisher, and it doesn't help the fact that they really don't have a number 9. And that I know they did kind of make a desperate move in terms of bringing Jersey Zardes into this team, and so far in the early days of Zardes, yeah, he hasn't really been producing that much for this Rapids team, though I'm not going to say it's going to be a complete bust that the Rapids bought Zardes from Columbus, because it is still early days for Zardes in his time with the Colorado Rapids. But yeah, this big question of that number 9 is really kind of holding back this team, and that we're finally starting to see where, as much as I know this Rapids team has a lot of heart and that they play very hard under Robin Fraser, well, that only take as far until the talent gap is going to shown, and that you can clearly see with this team. I mean, they do have some decent players, but it's just on the attack. They definitely, if you consider them to be a team that is in the top 4, they definitely lack in that category, and that unless they do fix it in the summer transfer window, this could be a rough season for the Rapids, and maybe a season that they're going to suffer regression, which again, I don't think a lot of people are surprised, because I think last year this was a Rapids team that really peaked, and that they would do for a regression this season, though I still didn't think that it was this hard of a regression with them really struggling in the last couple of games. And I believe now, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're now outside of the playoff position. I mean, for a team that looked like they were going to be pushing for the top spot once again in the early season, now dropping below the red line, if I recall. Yeah, that's a huge disappointment, you got to say, for the Colorado Rapids. But now moving on to the Columbus Crew. And again, for Columbus, I mean, again, it's been a very mediocre season for the Columbus Crew, and I think mediocre is definitely something Crew fans will not take after a disastrous season last year where they were wrecked by injuries, and that this season, unfortunately for Caleb Porter, he doesn't have that excuse anymore, and that it just have not been a good start to the season for this team. I mean, they did show some promise, at least in the first 2 games, and then they went on that disastrous run. I mean, they did finally get a much needed win against DC, but then, they did draw 2-2 against New England, and that, this is a team that for the past couple of years, they have struggled on the road, and it's definitely showing once again this season. And that, for a team that struggled on the road, that definitely puts a lot of pressure in terms of the home form, and Columbus hasn't really been lighting it up at home either. I mean, they have lost a couple of games at home too, and at the rate that the Crew are in, they're not going to make the playoffs. And if that's the case, then I think Caleb Porter could be facing some heat, because this is a team that should be very talented. I mean, when you have guys like Lucas Zarian in your team, you should be a team that should be competing for some of the top part of the Eastern Conference table, but right now that just have not been the case. And even with some of these guys coming back from injuries, teams still look like a team that is not at their best level, and look nothing like the Columbus Crew team that we saw that won MLS Cup just 2 years ago. But now moving to DC United, and for DC, I mean, I think DC fans should be happy with the way that, I know I put them in things could be better, but could be worse. And, a lot of that has to reiterate in terms of the second point, because, it could be worse. The fact that they could be still stuck with Hernan Losada, and how they would continue this miserable run that they had in the beginning of the season, because ever since Chad Ashton stepped into this team, you can definitely see that this team has had some improvement. But, like what I'm about to say about the Quakes, when I do get to talk about the Quakes and the emotion index, it's a very small sample size of whether or not if this team is going to make a playoff push. And especially, whenever you get a head coach fired and an interim head coach comes in, you get that new coaching boost, which we'll see how long that will last. And especially another guy that I want to mention that has really transformed this DC team is Taxi Funtas. I mean, again, it is still a small sample size, and that you can't just say that he is definitely going to be a guy that is nailed to be the newcomer of the year. But in the early days of Taxi Funtas for DC, he has really helped this attack that desperately need help. And if he can continue that, then there could be a case that this DC team could make it to the playoffs. And I even say that I think when you look at this team, there is a chance that they could make it to the playoffs. Especially the system that they're running in right now, it's still not that far away from the Hernan Losada system. I mean, it feels like Chad Ashton is pretty much almost running the Hernan Losada system, but at least kind of tingle a little bit where, under the Hernan Losada system, it's constant pressure. We don't see that happen. I mean, we do still see it, but we don't see it like every single minute of the game, which, that is definitely a good thing for DC, knowing the fact that, again, one of the big flaws of the Hernan Losada system is that when you high press 90 minutes straight, that's just not going to work. Like, you basically are just running your team to the ground and just exposing yourself on the counter attack. But now moving on to the next team, FC Dallas, and I mean, Dallas fans should be very happy with their team. I mean, it's been an incredible start and a great turnaround round two this season. And I think this is a season that not only it's a mix of the fact that some of those young homegrown talent is definitely performing well, and a guy by the name of Jesus Ferreira, who I did say that he was going to be the next breakthrough player from this FC Dallas team coming out of the academy after Ricardo Pepi left, and boy has he performed. I mean, he's performed at a rate where he's now actually considered to be on the U.S. men's national team, and could maybe even be now on in terms of the World Cup roster, and that there's definitely going to be a lot of European team that is keeping an eye on Jesus Ferreira as really the next big American that is going to make that big money move that comes out of the Dallas Academy. But I think the other thing that you got to say about this Dallas team, especially something that they have struggled throughout the past couple of years, is some of the transfer signings. I mean, the last couple of years, that's been really what's holding back this Dallas team, where you can only feel so many good academy talent that you still need to hit on some of the signings that you made in some of the veteran present. And we talk about how Dallas has failed to do that years after years. That's not the case this offseason. I mean, the likes of Alan Velasco has really performed well, and definitely gunning for that newcomer of the year award. But even guys like Paul Arriola doing pretty much almost the Paul Arriola thing that we saw what he did with DC United. And yeah, overall it's been incredible. And even their goalkeeper Martin Paz, who has really been a very, very under the radar move, and you could even say that he's becoming one of the more underrated goalkeeper too. I mean, a lot of people mention the fact that he's actually a really decent goalkeeper, making some big saves at some of these games. And that, yeah, again, Dallas fans are very happy with their team. Not only the fact that they're happy that once again they are proud of being renowned as the team has the best academy in the league, and it's been proven with some of these homegrown players coming out of it and are performing well, but also with the way that they're finally getting the thing that has really been a problem and the Achilles heel for this team, which is they finally can get some of these veteran signings into the team and they actually turns out to be boom rather than bust, for as what we've seen for the past couple of years. But now moving to the Houston Dynamo. So for the Dynamo, I mean, yeah, I mean it. I feel like its reality has started to show on this Dynamo team that this is still a team that is clearly rebuilding. And as much as I know they kind of overachieved a little bit in the beginning of the season, these last couple of games have shown that the Dynamo is starting to regress a little bit. And again, it is expected because when you look at this team, yes, they have some decent pieces that could be good for the rebuild that can form a core, and also they do have some placeholder on the team that is starting to kind of play over their head a little bit. You knew that eventually was going to slow down, and that it has definitely slowed down in these last couple of games, and the Dynamo is starting to get back to a position where I think even their fans kind of accepted the fact that, yeah, as much as they are struggling and it is kind of frustrating, I'm pretty sure a lot of Dynamo fans had no expectation this year. Like, all they need is just don't finish in the wooden spoon spot in this deep rebuild that they're going through, and that it would be considered a success in terms of the fact that, yeah, I mean, I feel like this is the year where you can definitely start to see that this team is rebuilding, even though I know they did sign a couple of placeholders there, but they're just placeholder until they do start to maybe be a little bit more ambitious in the future and start to build in a new core and get themselves back to being a competitive team as what we saw in the early decades of the 2010s. But now moving to Sporting KC, and for Sporting KC, yeah, they're right next to where the Chicago Fire is. Where, yeah, if you're SKC fans, it has been a disastrous season for them. And it's unsurprising that this disastrous season was all because of the fact that they just cannot score. And that I mentioned in the beginning of the season, they need to get Showery and Russell to carry the low on this offense. And at least in some games, Showery and Russell has carried the low, but not enough in a way that they should be consider a team that is in the playoff position. In fact, both of those guys have really regressed, and it's not a big surprise that they aren't able to score goals, because besides those two, there's nobody on this team that can put the ball into the back net. But also, I feel like their defense, which, in the last couple of years, it has been kind of a struggle for this team, and I feel like this season, last season it was kind of a struggle, but it was kind of hideaway because Melia was playing at his prime again. That's not been the case this year. I mean, there's been time where Melia has started to look and started to, kind of show father time a little bit. I mean, people forget that Tim Melia has started to get up to that age in terms of being a goalkeeper. I mean, I feel like you still have at least a couple of years left in the tank because of him being a goalkeeper, but, you definitely start to see signs that he's not going to be as sharp as what we know of the Tim Melia from a couple of years ago. And if you have all that, it's no surprise that they are struggling this season. I mean, they cannot win on the road, and they also struggle at home too, and that they're in this midst of 4-game winless run where, unless something does change for this team, especially, I feel like in this summer transfer window, they're going to definitely try to make a splash in terms of the attack to really fix this attacking issue. This feels like a very similar situation in 2019 where they also kind of had the problem from not only defending, but also goal scoring was an issue for this team too. But now moving on to the next team, and that is the Galaxy. And, for the Galaxy, I think you would say that Galaxy fans should be happy with how their team is. But, again, I do want to say that, Galaxy fans have to be careful. The fact that, I think maybe there are some Galaxy fans, especially the pessimistic one, that kind of have warned their own fan base that don't let this early good start distract you, and don't let that 1-0 win against Austin yesterday distract you from the fact that this team still have problem in terms of scoring without Chicharito, and especially without Chicharito, who he did get off to a great start, but these last couple of games, and I can't believe this has not made a bigger headline, he has struggled to put the ball into the back of net, and he has started to now go back to the form that he was when he came into the league, where he mentioned many times that was really the rock bottom of his career. But yeah, if they can't get Chicharito going, I mean, I think the one thing that maybe is the reason why the Galaxy is still keeping afloat, at least in the last couple of games, despite their goal scoring woes, is surprisingly their defense has been solid. I mean, it's kind of shocking the fact that for once I am saying the Galaxy are playing very well on the defensive end. Just don't look at the set piece one, because the set piece one is still bad. But at least when they just kind of defend and open play, they're one of the best team so far this season. They haven't conceded a lot of goals from open play. So yeah, I mean that's kind of what's really keeping them afloat, and I guess maybe that's a good thing because at least their defense, that's an improvement on this defense that has really been the reason why it has held back this team to be a competitive team. But now it seems like they have the issue of goal scoring, and that I think that could easily frustrate fan base too, because you know how fan base, when they saw how their team able to score and can't defend, they're very frustrated about that, and now they can be equally frustrated because now you have trouble. I mean, you improve on the defense, but now we have issue in terms of the attack, and nobody on this team. Well, I wouldn't say nobody, because we did see a couple of guys that have scored a goal for this Galaxy team that is not named Chicharito, but in terms of being a lethal finisher like Chicharito, we have not seen that for the Galaxy at all this season. And I think it's also safe to say that that Douglas Costa move, that I was already skeptical when I saw him coming to the Galaxy, and that move is now started to already look like it's a bad move, with the way that Douglas Costa has really not contributed on the attack, and hasn't even been able to find the ball in the back of net, except for that free kick goal that he scored against the Sounders. But now moving to LAFC. So while their neighbor is kind of starting to fall a little bit, even though there's been some game that it's been kind of used as a smoke screen to realize the Galaxy is actually in more trouble than they suggest where they're in the standing. This team is definitely not in trouble. LAFC. I mean, this feels like it's 2019 all over again, where this LAFC team is absolutely unstoppable, and they're head and shoulder above everybody. But what's interesting about this team compared to the 2019 team is that I feel like this team is still a little bit different to the 2019 team. I mean, the 2019 team was one that it was just an absolute juggernaut. Like, they literally run everybody off the floor every single game. And that I think this team, that's just not been the case. I mean, there's been times that LAFC have shown that, especially in the second half. But that's pretty much it. Like, in the second half, that's when they have shown that they are a team that looks similar to the 2019 one, which is able to put teams away and really put on the throttle. And I think that isn't really a big issue, because again, you'd rather be a good second half team than just be a good first half team and be a bad second half team, because we know that when you're a good first half team and you're a bad second half team, that means you basically lead the league in terms of conceding goals and have trouble finishing games. But at least for this team, they have been very good in terms of coming alive. And also, I think one thing that this team may be a little bit different from the 2019 team is that they don't just rely on two superstars to carry the team. That 2019 team, they were heavily reliant on Vela and Rossi. That's just not been the case. I mean, Vela, he's been having an okay season, but he's not lighting the world on fire. And really, the reason I feel like this team kind of reminds me a little bit, maybe of that Colorado team last year, where they've been able to find ways to score goals from every part of the field. Like, they literally lead the league this season in terms of the most goals scored by a substitute. So yeah, this has been a very different LAFC team than what we accustomed to. But in terms of the performance wise, it's still pretty much the same, in that they're back setting the standards and trying to finally be the say that this is finally the year that they would win that MLS Cup that they've been looking to win it ever since they came into the league. But now going to Inter Miami, and for Inter Miami, yeah, I mean, remember that 3-game winning streak that they had, and it feels like things were back to normal, or well, no, not back to normal, but things are just amazing. Yeah, lately it feels like it's back to normal. It feels like this Inter Miami team is back to being a team that we saw in the beginning of the season, and that just kind of sums up Inter Miami as a whole. I mean, this team has just been such an inconsistent team in their franchise history, and unfortunately, inconsistency is not going to make it to the playoffs. And I'm pretty sure their fan base are kind of known too, because it feels like now their fan base, even when they're on a winning streak, they can't even be confident about it, because they know that when they do finally lose a game, that's when the bottom basically drop. And it feels like, as soon as they lost their first game against New England, you knew that things are going to go bad, and it has been bad since. I mean, they have looked nothing like that team that were able to finally end their winless run and go on an incredible run. But now moving to Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of concern for this Loons team, and I feel like Minnesota is starting to head in the same direction as the Chicago Fire, where this is a team that at least has good defense for majority of the year, but because of the fact that the attack has been woeful throughout the season, they've really started to drop down the table, and I feel like this team could have even been worse in the position if it wasn't for Dane Sinclair just saving them game after game. I mean, how many times this season we have seen Dane Sinclair simply stealing points for the Loons because of some of the big save that he has made throughout this year, and that unfortunately Dane Sinclair can only do so much if the offense just keep putting goose egg in most of the game. Which, by the way, speaking of that, I think that game, well, actually that was, I think, the third time that the Loons has been putting a goose or putting a goose egg at the end of the game, and that again, this is an attack that I think during that stretch when they were able to score 3 goals in back-to-back game, I feel like that was just a mirage, and that I feel like this team still has the issue of scoring goals, and I think this year maybe even exaggerating more, because at least last season, even when they do struggle to score goals, at least they score like 1 or 2 and able to do so. Nowadays, it would be a miracle to see this team score more than 1 goal, and that again, if you cannot score more than 1 goal multiple times, you are not putting yourself in a good position to get wins and also get resort, and that again, something's got to change with this attack, and that right now when I look at this attack, the only guy that I can be at least very confident that he can produce is maybe Reynoso and Lud, and even Lud, he has his limits with him sometimes being very inconsistent in terms of finishing. And then Reynoso, at least Reynoso in these last couple of games, I think he has started to look like himself. But again, Reynoso can do so much until the attack is not helping him whatsoever, or decided to not get into good position in the attack to kind of help him out. So yeah, I feel like this team is definitely heading the wrong direction. It's also no surprise that there's already some Minnesota fans have already started to call Heath out, and that Heath out kind of brigade that's been kind of ringing throughout this team for the last couple of years is just getting louder and louder with the way that this team has struggled this season. But now moving to Montreal, and for Montreal, I mean, their fans is absolutely ecstatic with their team. Like this team, at least in the last 4 games, and really ever since they're on this longest active unbeaten streak, they have looked like a playoff. Not only a playoff team, but actually a contender. And, I talk about this Montreal team. They are quietly, could be a dark horse kind of team, and that in some way that kind of reminds me a little bit of the Colorado Rapids, where I will say that at least with this team, they maybe have just a little bit more talent compared to the Rapids, because the Rapids were a team that it was built on the team is basically the star, and that they were built on hard-working player, and that at least in this team, you can definitely identify some superstar player in this team. Guys like Georgi Mihailovic, definitely in MVP consideration, and maybe even for U.S. men's national team consideration. I mean, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The fact that Georgi Mihailovic is not even in this U.S. men's national team conversation is absolutely criminal. Like, he is just playing out of his mind this season for Montreal, and we saw it again last season. Even in his breakout year for the Chicago Fire in his last season, and that, yeah, I am shocked the fact that he's not getting called up by the national team, and you just feel like it's inevitable. Like, I think Greg Berhalter eventually is going to have to do it, and probably the friendlies coming into June is going to be that opportunity to do so. But even when you look at other contribution on this team, I mean, Kyoto has continued. There's been times that Kyoto has not looked sharp, but there's also times where he has just been absolutely lethal, and then not to mention that their backline is one of the more steadier backline this season, and that I think the only reason why Montreal hasn't really got themselves to be really the top team in the East is because of that slow start they had this season. I mean, if it wasn't for that slow start to the season, which is justified because they were in CCL, this team would have definitely been leading the East by now. But they are slowly getting to that point, and especially with some of the team above them are not really lighting themselves on or going on a hot streak. I mean, even the team that's leading the East, the Union, haven't really done that good in the last couple of games. They're just barely hanging on to that position in the East. If Montreal continue to win, they can find themselves at the top of the Eastern Conference in no time. But now moving to Nashville. And for Nashville, I mean, yeah, I think Nashville fans should be happy. I mean, yes, I know when you look at the standings, Nashville is in 7th place and they're just above the red line right now. But this was expected. I mean, when you are a team that gone through an 8-game road trip to start the season and now have a lot of home games in the backlog of the schedule, you're going to expect to get off to a slow start. And that, at least, again, it is still a very small sample size, but, at least in these 2-game, Nashville has been able to get 4 points, which is pretty decent to start the backlog of home game that they had. But if they can continue to win those home games, then they can definitely slowly get up in the standings. Now, I'm not sure they can get as high as first place, because unlike what I talked about Montreal with the way that they could get to first because teams above them are not lighting on fire. That's not the same with the Western Conference, and especially with LAFC. I just feel like, if LAFC continue to be like this looks like it's 2019 all over again, where they're just going to run away with the league. But, that second position could be up for grabs, and I will also say that there are some teams about near the top of the standings are also having a decent start to the season. Well, actually, I would say that maybe the Galaxy might be the team that could fall, though. The another team that is definitely on the rise is FC Dallas and Austin. If they can start to get those wins against real competition, they could also stay hot, and that it's going to be tough for Nashville to climb the standings. But things can happen. I mean, maybe the teams above them can go on a bit of a cool stretch, and next thing you know, Nashville could get themselves in a very good position. I mean, I feel like this is still a team that's going to make it to the playoffs, and this team is definitely going to make it to the top 3 if they can continue to win their home games. But now moving to the New England Revolution, and for the Revs, I mean, it's been a frustrating season for the Revs, and I know their fan base are very frustrated with the way that they are clearly underachieved this year. And I know some will say that, CCL might have played a factor, but we're now a long way from CCL that has happened. Like, that CCL hangover that the Revs is having should not still exist now. And maybe, I guess, the Revs are kind of maybe falling the same victim to Toronto FC, where it was kind of a team that, TFC also kind of go deep in CCL, and that once they crash out, they kind of had a season hangover. Though you can't really say the same thing about New England, because the Revs, they kind of haven't had a hangover or haven't had a deep run, and that, yes, there was that heartbreaking loss against Pumas, but they should be recovering by now. And I think a lot of that has to do with maybe teams have started to figure out how to play against the Revs, but also the fact that there's just so many players on this team that has underachieved. And we'll see whether or not if they can turn around. I mean, their fans are hoping that they can turn around too. And also, it doesn't help the fact that they've now kind of becoming the team that doomed the Portland Timbers a couple of years ago, which is the team that just cannot finish the game off and cannot hold on to leads. I mean, I'm sorry, Timbers fan, that I have to bring that up, but I had to bring that up when the Revs are leading the league in terms of the most goals conceded in the final 15 minutes. But moving on to the New York Red Bulls. So for the Red Bulls, I mean, this is tough, because, I mean, like, what's tough about this is that, yes, the Red Bulls are in the top part of the table, and I think they're still in the top 3, but it's been just such a bizarre season for this team. Like, it is, I still cannot believe that this team is able to win all these road games and able to not break the record, but tie the record for the longest winning streak to start the season on the road. And then when they're playing at home, they look like a team that look nothing like the team on the road. I mean, it just feels like we've seen two versions of the Red Bulls, and that if you're a team of a fan of that team, and especially you can maybe say that that's kind of an inconsistent run, it's got to be frustrating, because you know that this team could be like that on the road when they're playing at home. But I guess maybe you could say that it maybe is the style of how the Red Bulls play, because the Red Bulls is a team that has the least amount of possession, and when you have the least amount of possession, you know how you can be comfortable by doing that well, you can be comfortable when you're playing on the road because most of the time road team doesn't get as much possession and they kind of likes to go on the transition as we've seen with the Red Bulls done throughout this season. But again, it's still kind of bizarre with the way that they just struggle so much at home and yet on the road they look like the best team in the league and look like a team that is unstoppable. Now, I will say that these last couple of road games, they maybe had got a little bit fortunate too, but still, when you're able to win on the road like they have done and find ways to win on the road, it's got to be very impressive. But it's also got to be very frustrating the fact that how in the world can they not show that kind of effort when they're playing at home. But now moving on to NYCFC. So for NYCFC, I think they're back up to here. And again, I think this is one of the teams that I mentioned. Yes, they kind of got off to a slow start of the season, but it's mainly because of CCL. But once they got out of it, this attack has started to really shown like the NYCFC attack that we know of from previous season, which is a very deadly attack. And although in the last game that attack did kind of came into a screeching halt, which will happen. I mean, it's very hard in this league to look very good on the attacking end every single game, and you're going to have games that where there's going to be some frustration where nothing is going well. But at least for NYCFC, I'm expecting that they should be able to bounce back, and that this is a team that is starting to look more like that team that won MLS Cup. And then if they can continue this run, they maybe have a chance to defend the crown. I mean, I don't want to say they're going to defend their crown because, again, it is very hard to repeat as MLS Cup champion. But at least one thing that they've shown is that they have not suffered the MLS Cup hangover like what we saw from the Columbus Crew last season. But now moving on to Orlando City. And for Orlando, again, I mean, they're kind of in the same story as the New York Red Bulls, where this is another team that, for whatever reason, they do well on the road this season, but yet when they're playing at home, there's times where they look like a team that isn't that good. Now, I say that they did well on the road, but in the last game, they got absolutely throttled by Montreal. And even when you look at some of the road games that they had, it's been very just kind of grind out and just kind of almost just park the bus throughout the game and hope to maybe nick a goal. I mean, in some way, they're basically doing the Nashville SC approach. Like, it's hard to believe that Oscar Pereira has now gone from being a head coach that play open-ended soccer and playing some of the most beautiful soccer we've seen in the league to now playing a Gary Smith kind of Nashville SC kind of bunker ball. And I don't think Orlando City fans are that happy about that, but hey, it's getting them resort on the road until in the last game against Montreal, where that kind of style, it did not work whatsoever. So yeah, for Orlando, they're a team that is kind of weird that they're still near the top part of the standings, and that you can maybe easily say that they're kind of like the pretender of MLS with the way that they haven't been playing well, but somehow they just play good enough to get themselves in a good position in the standings. But now moving on to the Philadelphia Union, who is in first place, and again, like I said, the Union. I mean, I know their fan base will still point out that they're in first place in the standings, but you just feel like the cracks have started to finally shown after they suffer their first loss, and that goal scoring is still an issue with this team. I know they scored 2 goals in the last game, but for most part of this season, goal scoring is definitely an issue. They haven't got their new DP striker Michael Urut getting going, though. One guy that they have definitely got going this season is Julian Carranza, which I'm not surprised because you knew that Carranza, as much as he struggled with Inter Miami, when he comes to the Union, I thought that was a good move because he joined a perfect team that will fit with the ways that he likes to play, and it's no surprise that he's thriving under the Union compared to what he did with Inter Miami. But yeah, this team at least so far this has been kind of a very Jim Curtin kind of team, where this is a team that's not going to wow you. Like, they're not going to blow teams out every single game. They're going to grind, and they're going to get like 1-0 or 2-1 result every single week. And while it kind of has worked out for the most part of the season when they go on that unbeaten run, it has definitely started to show that crack and that inability to really be pulling on the attack. It started to kind of wear this team a little bit, but not by much, in a way where they're in danger of losing that first position. I mean, I will say that with the way that teams below them have also struggled, maybe that's the reason why they've been remain good hold of that first position in the East. But now moving to the Portland Timbers. yeah, I mean, for the Timbers, it's just not going well for them whatsoever in the beginning of the season. And that, I know Timbers fans will say that eventually this team will turn around. Like, you would expect that Sarah Reese eventually will get this team back on track, but right now it still doesn't feel like it's happening. And that, this is why I've said they can't wait to play against the Seattle Sounders. And even though I know when they do play against the Seattle Sounders on the road, and that the Sounders are going to really shove it in their face about how they were able to win CCL. And in fact, they even announced that they're going to raise the banner of winning CCL against the Portland Timber at the Cascadia Derby. We've seen this before, where if the Timbers can get a big win, and especially a statement win in a derby game, they can definitely go on a run. And again, right now they need. I know injuries has been an issue for this team too, because for the most part they didn't have Blanco and didn't have Diego Chara, but still every team deals with injuries. And that right now, I think this also kind of just shown that this Timbers team is not as deep as what we once thought, and that these players that are coming in to replace some of their important player are definitely not performing at a rate that they hope. And it could be at a rate where they don't get going and they fall themselves behind too much, which, I mean, right now they aren't really that far out of the playoff position despite this slow start. And that if they can go on a good run, they can definitely get themselves back in the playoff position. But again, this slow start has been frustrating, and for Timbers, if you're a Timbers fan, it's been kind of frustrated with how you're just hoping eventually that breakthrough does happen, because we've seen before where maybe fan base have, eventually that breakthrough will happen, and it never happened, and they went on have a really rough season and missed the playoffs. But now moving on to RSL, and for RSL, I mean, I guess things are still on the right track. I mean, for RSL, there's no doubt that this team is started to kind of get back down to earth after that incredible start that they had. But still, I think their fans should be very happy with this team, because the expectation for this season wasn't really that high, and the way that I did predict them to not make it to the playoffs, because it's gonna take time for this new ownership to finally get this kind of project begin to get themselves back to being the best. But at least right now they're kind of ahead of that schedule, though in the last couple of games, like I said, it started to, you definitely started to see that this team is coming back down to earth. But they're just hoping that it doesn't come back down to earth too much, where they could now start to find themselves outside of the playoff position. But now moving on to the San Jose Earthquakes, and for the Quakes, again, yes, they're on a good run, and yes, it's pretty clear to say that Almeida was clearly the problem, and that when you have a team that isn't actually sabotaged by your head coach with just crazy tactics and putting guys out on position that they never have played in their career, and that it's not surprised that they got themselves back in a good way, I still don't believe that this team is going to make the playoffs. I mean, I like what I said about DC. I think this is just an example of a team getting a new head coach boost, or in this case, an interim head coach boost. And that until I see this team does eventually go on a great run and get themselves back into a playoff position, I still don't believe this team will make it to the playoffs. Like, I've seen this before, where this team cannot fool me many times. That even on the great run, I still are very pessimistic, because I know eventually the bottom, of course, would drop. And that right now, as good as the feeling it is seeing this team playing well, is that going to be sustainable? And is this team going to maybe play up to their potential this year, with the way that I thought that maybe this is a lost season, with the way that they're still in the reign of finding a new head coach to replace Almeida. But now moving to the Seattle Sounders, and I'm actually going to create a special category here for the Seattle Sounders, and I'm not going to write it out, but this is a special category of saying they won the CONCACAF Champions League. And that's pretty much it. I mean, they are pretty much happy no matter what this season, because of the way that they won CCL. I mean, you could maybe even argue that even if the Sounders miss the playoffs, which I highly doubt that's gonna happen, because everybody knows they're gonna have a second half resurgence, right? I mean, surely they're not gonna be falling to the latest problem of going deep into CCL and eventually have a hangover, right? I mean, this is the Seattle Sounder, or as Brian Schmetzer would like to say, the Seattle effing Sounders. So yeah, I think their fans definitely are not panicking whatsoever with their poor league form, because I'm assuming it's going to pick up, though it will be a little bit more challenging because, well, I wouldn't say a little bit more challenging. I mean, I remember in 2016 when they were in the same position as they are in right now, and they gone on a crazy second half resurgent to get into second position. That feels like it's going to happen, and especially when they eventually are going to get going in the second half of the season, this team is going to be unstoppable, and this is also maybe the reason why they're going to go to MLS Cup, aren't they? I mean, it feels like it's in the destiny of this team to go on an incredible run in the second half of the season. For everybody that they're getting off to a slow start, and then the insufferability that, it's already insufferable seeing Sounders fan kind of bang their chest of being the first MLS team to win CCL, which they have every right to do so because it's history. That's something nobody has ever done in MLS history, but it'll be even more insufferable with the way that they're going to have an incredible second half resurgent, and fans around the league is going to be frustrated the fact that, oh great, here we go again, we know what's going to happen, the Sounders are going to go on a crazy run, make it to the playoffs and win MLS Cup, and their fans are going to continue to talk about how, yeah, there's a reason why we didn't really care about the first half of the season whatsoever. But now moving to Toronto FC, and for TFC, oh yeah, I mean, these last couple of games have really got this team back to here, and in some way they're very similar to Inter Miami, where there was that hope, at least in that short stretch where this team got themselves into a playoff position, but it seems like that hope was a complete mirage because they have now lost, I think 4 straight games, and that they have now looked like a team from last season, which is a team that seems like it's going to miss the playoffs. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, this team, I get what this team is trying to do. I guess this team is trying to maybe move into the youth movement while also maybe bring in a couple, or getting some good attacking talent, especially, them still waiting for the arrival of Lorenzo Insigne. I guess that's kind of how they built the team, but it's kind of a very weird way to build a team. I mean, it almost feels like this team, I don't know if they have an identity. I mean, I feel like their identity maybe is saying be going for this youth movement, because you've seen a lot of these youth players from TFC that has made appearance for this team, which is kind of surprising that Bob Bradley is doing that, because Bob Bradley is not known to play the kids movement, especially during his time with LAFC. But the fact that he's doing it right now, and that, unfortunately this TFC is not a team that's known to bring in a lot of good youth talent. I mean, they have bring some decent one, but not at a level that we've seen with some of the elite team, and I think that's kind of is the reason why it's kind of hindered some of their resort, where a lot of these kids that is playing for TFC is just not ready yet for MLS level. And also, not to mention the veteran president of this team and guys like Pozuelo. Yeah, he it feels like Pozuelo has not looked the same ever since he went down with that or ever since he had that injury-prone season last year. And, that can happen. Like, even a star player, when you suffer that many injury in a season, it's going to wear you down. And we're definitely seeing with Pozuelo not having a good season. And it was even highlighted with the way that he missed a penalty, which is something that Pozuelo does not do often with this TFC team. But now moving to the Vancouver Whitecaps. So for the Whitecaps, yeah, I mean, yes, they did get a win in the last game against TFC, which I think that anytime when the Whitecaps gets a win, their fans are going to be happy, because it feels like it's very rare. But what's going to be frustrated is that they'll find out that win basically did nothing for them. Like, they're still dead last in the Western Conference. It's still a disastrous start to the season under Vanni Sartini, and that, at least I think that would maybe give a little bit heat off of Sartini a little bit, because I know right now maybe Whitecaps fans haven't really banged the Sartini out kind of drum that loud, because maybe they're still stuck in that honeymoon period of them making the playoffs last season, that incredible run that Sartini has guided this team into the playoffs. But at the rate of how coaches being fired, and they can turn to maybe being a hero to an absolute villain if performance is not going to be there. Oh, I think that's going to be the same case with Vinny Sartini. I mean, I love the energy of Vinny Sartini. He's definitely a very loved head coach, and maybe that's also kind of the reason why the fans haven't turned on him yet, because it's really hard to hate Vinny Sartini with the energy that he brings. But you can bring some good energy and some good personality to the team and certainly the fan base until when the resort are not show up. And this is a league that resort speaks to itself, and in fact, it's not just the league, but in sports in general here in American sports culture, where the resort is what it matters, and if you're not performing and the resort is not in favor of you, you can find yourself getting your job or losing your job because of it. So yeah, for the Whitecaps, if they continue this bad run, Sartini could definitely be under serious fire and could potentially be fired for this team. And it's a shame, because I love the energy of Sartini, and that if he does get fired, we're definitely going to miss that. But the reality is this team should not be going back to really kind of now set back to year one in their deep rebuild, which is a team that is being at the bottom of the Western Conference. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my emotion index, looking at all 28 teams and putting them in the emotion index. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, if I put some team a little bit too high in the emotion index or put them a little bit too low in the emotion index, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.